Okay, welcome everyone to the second installment of the Four Power Forum where leaders come to share. Just a few administrative notes before we dive into today's presentation. Right now, the webinar is in listen-only mode, so unless you're a presenter, you do not have the ability to speak, but when we get to the Q&A session, I'll convert it to Q&A mode, so you'll be able to unmute yourself at any time and ask a question. Also, you have the chat box down at the bottom in the lower left of the screen. So if you'd like to ask a question, you can use during the presentation. You can use that chat box, and we'll pause at the various points and see if there are any questions. And if you have one, just quickly post a chat, and we'll read the question out loud and try to do our best to answer it. So we are off and running here. Today's topic is hiring the right people. As we know, leaders are only as good as the team they surround themselves with. So I figured this was a great topic to help leaders figure out how to build the right teams around them. And before we dive into the program, I just want to refresh everybody on the four powers of leadership that form the actual framework that's in my book. And the first power that most leaders need to master is the power of poise. Mastering the inner you and basically having a good solid value system and control of your emotions. So the power of poise is about the inner you. Next, we have the power of presence, which is all about how we project confidence and project the inner self externally to others. So it's essentially how others see us. And presence is the chief power in creating confidence in others. The next power is performance. That's the power of achieving results. As you know, leaders are judged ultimately by whether or not they've achieved the results that we need. And the power of performance is exactly about achieving results. So today's presentation really falls into the power of performance. I always try to tie these topics to one of the four powers of leadership, and definitely having a good team around you is what enables good solid performance. And then lastly, we have the power of persistence, which is never giving up and viewing our goals as immutable and set in stone, so we are committed to our goals and committed to achieving what we set out to do. At this point, I would like to introduce our sponsor, Jan Fox. Many of you may recognize Jan. She has been a longtime TV personality. She's worked for ABC, NBC, and CBS. She now basically teaches effective communication to leaders of all types. And we know very well how important it is to be able to communicate effectively with the people that we lead. Not just when we're in a large-scale audience, but even when we're in a team meeting or some internal organizational action where the leader has to stand up and speak. Being able to speak well is directly tied to being able to lead well. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Jan, who's going to share with us a few quick tips on how to deal with nervousness when speaking. Jan, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. It's my pleasure. And I don't have to tell you how to get over your shyness because you're a great speaker. So there you go. I remember in junior high, there were all kinds of cliques. Do you remember those, Dan? Did you ever get left out of, if you ever got left out of one of those, you know what it's like to stand alone with the crowd kind of watching. Well, that's exactly what nervous speakers have done to themselves. They stand in a 2-foot square speaker box. They don't move. It's me and my box and all of you, and they're looking at me, and I have to be so careful. So one of the things I say is get out of the box. Just stand 2 or 3 feet out of that little perceived box that you built for yourself, and then take a look at that audience and tell yourself, they might have paid to come hear me. They need what I have. I'm the only one who can tell them what I'm going to say, the way I say it and the way I mean it. So then just embrace your audience. And I don't mean give them a giant bear hug, but I mean really Lean into them, talk to them as if you're talking to each one of them personally, as if you're grateful that they're there, and you're thanking them for being there by your tone of voice and by your body language. And all of a sudden, you will learn to love the high of that and will want to step out of your speaker box every single solitary time. There's one more big thing, Dan.
And what is that, Jan?
Well, you have to eat a big pill. And at the beginning of your speaking career, or your speaking, the job where you have to speak a lot, you have to eat it every single solitary time you're getting ready to speak. And it's plan, prepare, and practice. I have people who say, I don't like to practice too much. I want to keep it fresh. And then they wonder why they're nervous, because they don't know how it's going to come out or when to click or where to stand. So I say, take it every single time you have to speak. And then over time, the pill won't look so big and you won't have to practice so much. But I was working with the CEO of a very large company not long ago, and she gave me the I want to keep it fresh story. And I worked with her to practice anyway. We practiced and practiced. And the day before, she called me and said, I'm surprised I'm not nervous. And then the night after, she did a great job. She said, it was terrific, and I didn't feel a bit of nerves. I love this. I love this. So I think she ate the big blue pill whole.
Outstanding, Jan. Yeah, and I can definitely back that up with experience. I found that the more I practice a speech, actually the fresher it seems to the audience once I do get out there and actually present to them. And I think the reason for that is basically you're so comfortable that the natural inner you, that power of poise, really comes through and gets converted to a very strong power of presence. So I totally agree that practice is huge in that scenario.
And I don't mean memorize your talk. I never have people write out their talk. I never have them memorize it. We work from key points or from visual slides. And it just when that slide pops up, we know what we're going to say. There's great comfort in that. It's like a blankie.
Absolutely. Yep. Well, thank you very much, Jan, and thank you again for sponsoring. And so if we have any nervous speakers out there and you want some work with your presentations, feel free to reach out to Jan. Her contact information is right there on the bottom of the slide. You can reach her at foxtalks.com. Also feel free to email her, info@foxtalks.com, as well as a phone number 202-302-1241. And thank you very much, Jan, and I hope you can stick with us for a little while. I know you have an appointment, but feel free to stick around. If you'd like to join again in the program, just chime in.
Will do. Thank you.
You're welcome, Jan. And now I'd like to move to the next segment of our program. Our presenter today, we're quite fortunate to have her with us. Kathleen is a senior human resources professional with over 25 years of extensive experience in developing and implementing strategies, linking people, programs to corporate, financial, and business strategies. She's got a Master's of Science degree in Organizational Effectiveness and also a Bachelor of Science from the University of Maryland, College Park. She's a certified professional coach in her new life as a coach and trainer. And I'd like to welcome Kathleen today as a featured speaker.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. I am thrilled to be here today. This is one of my favorite subjects to speak on. And there are a lot of skills, as you pointed out, Dan, in your book, and as most of the people on the call know, there's a lot of skills that leaders need. But I would say that hiring the right people in the right role is the most important job of a leader. And maybe it's my, nearly 30 years in government contracting where people are really all you're selling to your customers that gave me that perspective on that. But I also think that the war for talent right now is very, very competitive, and I'm sure folks on the phone are very familiar with that. It's in every industry right now. So selecting the right person for the job has never been more important than it is today. So I'm not going to talk about the process of hiring, but I'm really here to share my experience both as an HR professional and as a leader with regard to hiring the right people. And this includes some of my own hiring mistakes and lessons learned. So just like a bad diet can impact many areas of your life, a poor hiring decision will also affect many areas of your business, but especially the bottom line. So if you've ever had a bad hire or a mishire, you know that you not only wasted your time and money in the recruiting and hiring process, but then it takes time and energy and effort to fix the problem. So I want to just, for the agenda for the next few minutes, I want to share with you 3 areas, 2 successful hiring principles that I use that I believe are really important, 3 key strategies to hiring, and then 4 great interview questions. And then I'll end up with what I think is my favorite interview question that really helps me to really hire the right people. So before talking about getting into the meat of the program here, think about a time when you made a bad hire. You know, that person you hired a couple of months ago, the one with the great resume, and now they just kind of flamed out because it wasn't a good fit. Or, you know, you've hired someone who looked great on paper, but then failed to perform. What for you? Does anybody have any thoughts about if they've had a bad hire?
Well, I can start that off, Kathleen, for sure. You know, if you hang around long enough in a management position, you're going to encounter a bad hire. And there was one particular situation I recall where it was actually an internal transfer, and the person looked fairly decent on paper, and I actually called his existing manager, asked him whether or not the individual could do the particular job that I thought that I had in mind for them, and then the remarks came back as glowing remarks, and then sure, that person turned out not to be such a star after all, and that was a tough position there, because it not only created difficulty for me internally, but it also ruined my relationship with that manager who recommended the individual, because now I could no longer trust him. So that was a really bad hiring misfire, as I like to call it.
Yeah, and, that happens.
Clean it up too.
And yeah, and you know, for all leaders, you're not alone in this. And the next 2 questions I have is to think about when you had a bad hire. Were you really clear? Was there clarity around what the role was, what the skills, the knowledge, and the attributes, those unspoken things that we'll talk about in a little bit, that are needed for success in that role? And then were you out proactively scouting for talent before you had a need for it? So 2 successful hiring principles for me start with, before you can hire for the fit for the role, you really have to know what you're looking for. And I'm talking about what traits do most successful people in that role have in common, what core values are near and dear to your organization and to you as a leader, as you're hiring people for your organization and your team, and what does it take to be successful in your organization. So it's up to us as leaders to define all the attributes necessary for the position. And the easiest way to accomplish this, for me anyway, is I create a comprehensive wish list. So talking to the people that this position will interact with regularly, So if I'm hiring a manager, I'll talk to the subordinates for the position, for other colleagues, and if you can, reviewing exit interview notes of past employees in that position is really helpful as well. And acquiring a working knowledge of what the day-to-day functions of the job are, and then determine which skills, knowledge, experience, and attributes for prospective employees.
Yeah, I think I just want to jump in. I really like that point you're making there, where successful hiring is an everyday job. Because as a leader specifically, if you know you have certain needs in the daily performance of your job, it's really to your advantage to be constantly networking and looking for people that are in the skill sets that you're looking for. And you can get to know them informally and really start to get a sense of their character, their work ethic, when there isn't, that kind of performance art that applicants put on. They come in and they present their best face, and it's very hard to drill behind that, because they're going to be good at interviewing, and they'll answer the questions with the stock answers. So when you're informally networking every day and you're looking at people and seeing who's accomplished, who has that good work ethic, and who would round out your skill set, I think that's a great tip there, to constantly be networking.
Yeah, it's constantly, and we'll talk about networking as well. But yes, you've got to always be hiring. I'm always, when I'm out in networking, when I was working as a HR leader, I was always scouting for talent, so that when openings would happen on my staff, I'd already have 2 or 3 candidates in mind to reach out to. Now, and many of you may have had this experience, where there are managers who come to HR or recruiting and say, I have an opening for this, whatever, a software developer, bring me one and call me when they show up. They're not involved in the process at all. Well, the chances of success or getting the right person in that role are not very high. So you've got to be involved in knowing exactly what you want, and then making sure that you're constantly scouting. You've got to practice it every day. Every meeting you go to, every community function, every conference, you've got to always be recruiting. So with those 2 principles in mind, let's talk about some strategies. What strategies do you currently have in place for hiring talent? And how successful have those strategies been?
Great. We had a question pop in from Sarah. Okay, and it might tie back to what you just finished, but let's see if we can answer it. What about an intangible quality like a sense of urgency? I work with deadlines. Yeah, that's good. The intangibles. I guess maybe you'll address that a little bit later, but any thoughts on that so far, Kathleen?
Yeah, that is a great question, because I believe that it is the intangibles that really make or break somebody's success in the role. Because you're right, when you're hiring somebody and you're working in a culture where you have an urgent, a person or a manager who's got an urgent style, you're not going to hire somebody who doesn't have that quick response. That's just not going to work. And so you've got to look at those styles, and you've got to look at the culture of the organization, and then match that, not only the skills and the knowledge, but match the style and to the position in the organization as well. So that's a great question.
Yeah, and I think some of the questions that interview questions that you're going to show us here in a little while can possibly serve to bring out some of those intangibles. But you definitely want to structure, your interview in advance. And I've found too that a lot of hiring managers, it's something that we need really badly to be able to bring the right people in, but it becomes an extra duty for us, doesn't it? Where we're basically, trying to do our day job and then trying to keep up with the requirements of the interview process. And as a result, many managers don't prepare properly for the interview. So a good tip there for Sarah's question too is to start and think as a team to basically, the interview team with HR and other stakeholders who would have an interest in making this hire to actually identify what the questions would be that would identify things like intangibles. So you have to come up with the good solid questions first to be able to smoke those out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks, Dan. So to that point, there are 3 key strategies that I have found that are the most, produce the best hires. And because there's no one place where all qualified candidates congregate, that you can go. However, there's these 3 strategies that you can employ that'll make your search more efficient. And that's network aggressively, partner with a staffing company, and then hire for the right values and attitude. So I could do a whole session and I do a lot of training on networking and how to network, because I absolutely believe this is just key to your success as a leader. And I think networking should be considered a professional activity and not just a casual event. So I know I'm diligent about networking. And one of the reasons is because someday I may need that connection. And I can always turn to my network whenever I have openings, and really the people that I trust, that I have a high level of trust with, that I know refer good people, know good people, I can turn on my recruiting actions pretty quickly through my network. You can't wait until you have the opening, which is the point. But someone in your network of contacts, whether it's clients, friends, family, they may know the perfect hire for you. And what's made it what technology has done to make it even easier is, social media sites, LinkedIn, Facebook, great tools for maintaining your network. So the more people know about you and your organization, your management style, what you offer to employees, the easier it's going to be to attract the caliber of candidates that you seek. And so that's another reason to be out there networking and having people getting to know you. So developing a broad network of contacts, and again, you all know better than anyone the power of a personal referral. Dan and I have talked about this a lot. The more people you know, the more likely you are to get good referrals. So,
and it reduces risk too, won't it, significantly? Because if you're getting a first-hand referral from somebody you already trust, you're going to have a higher sense of confidence in that hire that you're making.
Yep. So joining and being active in trade professional associations has always been something that's been important to me. And there are a lot of human resources professional organizations in the metro area. And if you're whatever industry that you're in, whatever profession you're in, really using your professional associations, and not just one, go to a number of them, because you make different contacts in each of these organizations. Becoming a member of your local chamber of commerce is great as well. You really get some good contacts there. And then think about organizations where potential employees would most likely be active and then become involved with them by volunteering. So if your organization or what's important to you is a particular charity, then go and volunteer there. You'll be surprised. The people that you meet that are aligned with your values or your organization's values, it's a great place for networking and also for identifying people that you may want to recruit later on. And then the most important thing, again, making it a daily priority. So if you can make 1 or 2 calls, emails a day to colleagues that you respect, just to touch base, you can keep your network active and working for you. And if you do that, you'll greatly increase your pool of available candidates for when you need them. So networking is just constantly networking will improve your ability to hire the right people. And then I recommend partnering with a search firm, because search professionals have a continuous resource of candidates that from which to draw, and a qualified recruiter has the time and the resources and the incentive to check deeper, to test, to evaluate with more scrutiny each candidate that they're going to be proposing to you. And I'm really careful about the search firms that I use and the search professionals I use. I find them through networking and develop a real trust, so I don't just call up a staffing firm. It's real important that you know the people who are going to be helping you. And many staffing services have, special computerized skill assessments to test candidates and ensure proficiency levels. And they also tend to do more reference checks and can do that prior to any interviewing, so it saves you time. And then still others, you may find others that verify qualifications and certifications. Again, all helping to save you time in recruiting. So it can complement your search and dramatically enhance the level of candidates you interview. And again, with the most work on a straight contingency basis, you may have worked with some that if you're hiring for real high-level positions, they work on a retainer, but most work on a contingency basis. So it doesn't cost you anything unless you hire the candidate. And this becomes especially important if you're seeking people with special skills, information technology or healthcare providers, those kinds of things. So consider adding a staffing company to your strategy. And then I will always hire for heart over skills. I'll always choose character over competence. It's never failed me. And in fact, when I've had some of my hiring misfires, it's been when I, even though my heart was telling me something different, the data on the paper, looked really good, and I went with my head instead of my heart, and it was a mistake. So we need both. You can't just hire in your head or hire in your heart, but the heart trumps the head in my experience. And so I want qualities such as passion and honesty and follow through and commitment and integrity. So this is another place where the resume isn't much help. It's also where a recommendation from somebody else can help, somebody you trust can help. The key, I think, to getting it right is finding people with the right values alignment and attitude, and that's all, again, easier said than done because of the hiring process. Most of you know this intuitively. The alignment of values and the right attitude is more important than experience, but sometimes our heads override that. And I can't talk about the hiring for values and attitude without talking about the other side, which is as critically important, which is fire quickly if things aren't working out. That I cannot tell you how important that is. And maybe you've had this experience. I know for me, because I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. And I will go as, I'll do what I need to do and give people latitude. I'll change their responsibilities if it doesn't look like it's working out, or, I'll do the best I can to try to bring the best out in that person and get them focused on where their skills and gifts lie. But if I can tell quickly that, again, if it's an attitude or it's a more of a want to, if it's a can do issue, I can always train them. If it's a want to issue and you know it is, get rid of them fast, because having a poison pill on your team, or they will, everybody will know that person is not performing at the level that everybody else is. And I did make that mistake one time and really was trying to give the person who was on my team a lot of latitude. And it cost me a lot, because when I finally pulled the trigger, the rest of the team, almost to a person, said, "We were wondering what you were waiting for." So that was a good lesson for me.
Coincidentally, Kathleen, I just wrote a blog article on acting decisively for the greater good. It's one of the things that a leader's faced with that is an unpleasant part of the job in leadership. But you have to act for the greater good, because, as you say, this person is going to drag the team down, and also they're going to become kind of a time vacuum for you, because you'll be spending 80% of your time with this performance problem that you have. And then, how much time are you spending with your top performers, encouraging them, getting them to basically continue to grow? So it becomes that time vacuum that's absolutely brutal.
Something just happened to the...
Yeah, it's okay. I'll put it back up. We may have accidentally knocked the presentation off. There we go. Yeah.
Sorry.
Are you back to where you wanted to be?
No, go back. Oh yeah, there it is. Thanks.
So yeah, as I was wrapping up, and it sounds inhumane, or it sounds really harsh, but when you think about the benefit and the care and the trust that your team, you have to care about your team and their trust in you to be able to lead them through things. It's important that you do act decisively on these things, on these types of situations.
Absolutely.
Nobody likes to see like a poor performer kind of sitting there earning the same money. It kills morale. So there's lots of reasons why you want to act decisively.
Right, and it doesn't mean you don't do your due diligence. You absolutely do, but when you see that there's an issue, you do what you can to try to get the person back on track, and all of that, and definitely do your due diligence. But you don't drag your feet doing it, because it has just impacts down the line. Steve Bell, who is the owner of a multi-million-dollar cabinet business, I think said it really well. He said, if people have the same core values that we have, if they have a great attitude, if they have the ability to learn, then we can hire them and teach them anything they need to know about the business. And that's generally what I have found to be true. Again, and I'll use human resources. I've had to hire compensation specialists and employee benefit specialists, and they absolutely have to have the body of knowledge and the skills, but how their attitude and their customer service and all of that is as equally as important as their technical competence. So I want to share with you 4 great interview questions. These are interview questions that I think are really great. They work for me, and particularly getting at those attributes. And I would love to hear from you all what other interview questions that you have, that you use, that you have found to be helpful as well. I like this one. When you ask somebody about the last time they, a customer or coworker got mad at them, this, of course, gets at the interpersonal skills, as well as the ability for the candidate to deal with conflict. And that's critical in any business, and particularly if you're in a small business. So the key to this question is to keep probing so that you can find out why the customer or the coworker was mad, what the person did in response, and then the outcome. So this is where you really have to have good listening skills and, look out for the candidate who blames the other person or, takes no accountability for the conflict on themselves. So what you really want to hear is a candidate who accepts responsibility for their part in the conflict, but who work to rectify the situation. And this doesn't mean that they are a cause of conflict, but their actions suggest that they learned from the situation and they at least tried to fix things. So the next question that I like is, tell me about the toughest decision you had to make in the last 6 months. So the goal here is to evaluate the candidate's reasoning ability, their problem-solving skills, judgment, and willingness to take informed risks. And this is really great because I've had people not give me anything, not have an answer for this at all. So I consider that a warning sign.
Yeah, that's definitely telling unto itself, isn't it?
And other more positive responses may shed light on how the person made a difficult analytical decision based on reasoning, or perhaps a difficult interpersonal decision, but a really good answer will combine both. So making decisions based on data is important, but almost every decision has an impact on people as well. So your best candidates will naturally weigh all sides of an issue, not just the human side or the business side exclusively. Are there any thoughts about that? So the next question that I really like is, tell me about a time you knew you were right, but still had to follow directions or guidelines. So clearly here you are looking to evaluate the person's ability to follow, but also their potential ability to lead. So if the candidate went against these directions or guidelines because they knew they were right, then I'd consider that a warning sign. And likewise, you always want to note whether they followed directions but then let their performance suffer because they felt wronged or overlooked. And you can probe into that. Then positives to look for with this question, are people that looked at what needed to be done and met deadlines, in spite of everything, and then raised their concerns or issues at an appropriate place and time, always with the goal of improving things. So now if they did all this and stayed motivated while helping motivate others as well, then that's the person you want to seriously consider hiring. And the fourth great question, and I know it sounds simple and, but it's a deceptively simple question, but a powerful one. And this one I really like because, the main problem with any interview is getting through the fluff of the resume to the heart of the person's approach to work challenges. And typically you have, 30, 45 minutes to interview somebody. So when the person gives you, a situation or an example of an achievement, then that's when you got to dive in to the details on this. What results did you actually achieve? What was the position and what was your position and role? What were the key challenges? How did you overcome them? How did you create a plan? What resources did you have? How did you manage the plan and the resources and the deadlines? As well as what was your management style and how did you get results from the team? What went right, what went wrong?
The other thing I really like about this question is that it talks about achievement. And you probably have seen it a million times on resumes, Kathleen, where a candidate comes in and they'll use words like participated, supported, worked on. And those are all kind of like passive terms where if you're looking, particularly as a leader, to attract other leaders and other strong performers, you want achievement-oriented language on that resume. You want people to talk about the results that they get on a day-to-day basis in whatever job that they're in. And that's why I really like this question, because you watch the candidate, how quickly do they pop off, their favorite achievement that stands out most in their mind. And so it's, like you said, deceptively simple. It's a really good, solid, telling question that can help you probe into the individual's state of mind.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dan. And most of you on the phone, if you haven't been through any kind of behavioral interviewing training, that's an important skill to acquire, because you really want to dig into not what they would have done or what they're going to do. You really want to know, if you've had training, it's the STAR approach. What was the situation or task? What was your action? And what was the result? If you get all of those elements to their answer, you got a good candidate there. So with this question, I can quickly build up an insight into how a person approaches work and gets things done. So if you have someone who can't name a strong or a big achievement, then, alarm bells should start going off. So those are my 4 key questions that I always ask my candidates, and I get great data from that. But I have one question that's my absolute favorite question that I pretty much ask all candidates. And that question, the question, are you lucky, can reveal a lot about a potential employee. And I picked this up from Daniel Pink, the author of Free Agent Nation, and I find it very effective. He says that asking a job candidate about his or her proclivity towards luck shatters the pretense of a job interview and breaks down the kabuki theater aspect of most job interviews. And I have found that to be true, because in that broken moment, a person is more inclined to reveal a little, or sometimes a lot, of their true nature. For example, are they an optimist or a pessimist? Do they believe that hard work and some degree of luck have gotten them to where they are now? Or do they reveal some sense of entitlement? Or worse yet, do they believe that a series of mishaps and bad luck have landed them in front of you interviewing for this job that they don't really want? So asking a person whether or not they consider themselves lucky allows them to evaluate in your presence the trajectory of their life and define themselves in ways that are critical to job performance. So according to Dan Pink, individuals who believe that they are lucky tend to be collaborators, innovators, and employees who provide excellent customer service. So that's a great question. I'd be really interested in anybody's thoughts about that.
Feel free to enter a chat message if you have a thought or a comment.
So while you're thinking about that, just in summary, I think Larry Bossidy really had it right. I'm convinced that nothing we do is more important than hiring and developing people. And at the end of the day, you bet on people and not strategies. And so it becomes that, so hiring the right people, really being careful in how you select people, really understanding what you need, not being so busy that when an opening comes, you're just looking for a body to fill it. And that happens. That happens, particularly if you're running 100 miles an hour. But this is so critical to your success is making sure that the team around you is the A team. So I feel so strongly about this being so critical to leadership that just you gotta build this into your day and into your regular routine. So any thoughts? Any other questions?
We're at the Q&A portion at this time. Let me see if I can switch over to Q&A mode.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing star 6.
Okay. So basically, folks, if you have a question, now's the time you can actually speak up. You should be able to unmute your own mics at this point, or if you're on the phone, use the star 6 option if you'd like to ask a question of Kathleen.
Or if you have interview questions that you've used that you find are helpful or strategies for hiring, I would love to hear them.
Well, while we're thinking, I really, are you lucky? I saw your charts as we were preparing for this, and I didn't want to spoil the surprise for myself. I was dying to hear what you were going to say about it, but it's a very disarming question, isn't it? Because as you say, it kind of could catch somebody off guard, and that's something that I think I'm going to incorporate in all of my interviewing from here on. I really like that approach.
And I've gotten some great answers from that. I've had people that say, well, no, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps kind of thing, and I did this and I planned everything, and okay. And then I've had other people that really reflect and say, I've had some breaks. I did some things, that I'm proud of, but all in all, I think I'm pretty lucky. And that tells you get a whole different perspective on how somebody's going to fit with your team. Right?
Absolutely. And another thought, getting back to our slide on firing, there's a key aspect of that. If you have to correct a bad hiring decision, one of the things to consider is, as a leader, how you handle that. And it's important to always let the individual out of a bad situation with their dignity intact. And that's really a big deal, because I always talk about how leaders have a tendency to fill emotional voids in others. For example, if you see one of your employees is down, you boost them up. If they are fearful of making a particular mistake, you encourage them and you give them positive affirmations about their skills and their talents. So that's what I'm talking about when you're filling an emotional void as a leader. Now, when you think about a point where an individual is being let go from a job, isn't that like the perfect time for you to exercise your leadership skills and your care as a leader and fill that emotional void of fear, of dejection, of depression, and boost the individual up and let them out with their dignity. So when I've been in that situation, Kathleen, one of the things that I've always done is I've always tried to find some positive attributes of the individual and tried to get them repointed towards a career path that I thought might work best for them. And it's usually a situation of a bad fit. Sometimes it's just a bad attitude, and I'll counsel people on that too. I'll tell them, you've got to take stock of what you want to do in life and how much you want to apply yourself to it. That's the way it works. But leaving with their dignity intact is a big deal, because not only does it helps keep your company out of legal trouble too. If an employee thinks that you dealt with them fairly and honestly on the way out the door, they're much less likely to sue you.
And that is an excellent point. I had an experience that happened to me early in my career that I'm very grateful for. I had taken a job that I knew after I'd been there 2 weeks that I'd made a mistake, but because I was persistent, I was gonna make it work. And I was there almost a year, and I can remember closing my door pretty much every day and putting my head on my desk and crying. That's how much I hated this job. And one day my boss called me in and said, I don't think you should work here anymore. And I remember thinking, nope, I don't think I should either. And I can remember driving home that evening feeling so liberated because I knew it wasn't a good fit. And so when I later on as an HR professional, when I've had to, terminate people, I remember that I could be liberating them. And I've had feedback from employees that I've let go that they said, it's a relief for me. They might be mad at the moment because it's not their choice, but, people know when it's not a fit. They do. And so I always keep that in mind and figure out how I can help them on the way out. And like you said, Dan, help them to maintain their dignity through the process.
Outstanding. Okay, any questions from the audience? All right, I think we're just going to move on then. Folks, I want to thank you all very much for joining us today, and this is my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me if you need any leadership programs at your company, keynotes, seminars, and also presentation coaching. You can turn to Jan as well as myself. My number and my email appear right here, and I'd like to leave you with a closing thought that I think is very appropriate for this segment. Leaders are not personality alchemists. We can't turn hearts of lead into hearts of gold. So the hiring decisions we make are critical, because if you make a bad one, you're going to have to fix it very quickly. I'd like to thank again our sponsor, Jan Fox, for sponsoring this segment, and also to Kathleen. Thank you, Kathleen. You did a terrific job.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. It was great. Again, and if anybody has any questions, they certainly can contact me. I'm happy to talk to them.
Outstanding. Thank you again, everyone, and look forward to announcing next month's seminar. It'll come out the webinar. It'll come out in the newsletter, so just keep an eye out for that. And thank you all for joining us today. Take care. Have a great. Bye-bye now.